Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Shrimp Tank. I'm your co-host, Ted Jenkins, here with my co-host, Lee Heisman. And every week we bring you some of the brightest and best CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business owners in and around Atlanta and across the United States. The Shrimp Tank has been on fire, growing on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and anywhere around the internet. If you want to hear the interviews that Lee and I have done and our other cities across the United States, in Seattle and Boca Raton and Charleston and all over the place with just incredible entrepreneurs, simply go to shrimptankpodcast.com. Of course, every week, what do we try to do? We try to talk about book smarts. We try to talk about street smarts and that intersection. I even wonder if it makes sense to pay for an MBA anymore if you're going to be an entrepreneur. I think the only way you may be able to do it is bang your head against the wall 100 times, figure out what hurts, and then fix it from there. But we're excited today, Lee, because we may be in some holy presence today. And the reason I say that is that we've got Catie Campbell with us. She's not only the president, but she's the minister of magic. You can go to calibrimagic.com. She's a leadership coach, an expert, Lee, in EQ, and we're going to talk about that today, an author and a speaker, and much, much more. Catie, thanks for joining us on the program today. And I'm watching TV every day, and I'm watching what's happening in my city here in Atlanta. And Lee and I get to talk to tons of entrepreneurs, and it seems like all the smart people are saying there's a huge void in leadership today at every level. It seems like that. Why? What do you think is like driving this huge void of what seems to be incompetent people in leadership today?
Gee, Ted, I'm glad you started with a really easy question. So thanks for that. Let's be fair to all the people who are leading. I think the mantle of leadership is more difficult now than it's ever been. Yeah. I think for a long time, and while let's just say the three of us were kind of growing up professionally, it was really about just making sure the people were there, getting the stuff done, and we move on. And I think what we've seen over the last 3 years, in particular, post-pandemic and through the pandemic, is people started to pick their heads up a little bit and said, I expect more from the workplace. I expect more from the people who are leading me. I want more for myself. I want more in my career. I want to make sure that you've got my back. I want to make sure that I'm being developed here. I want to make sure there's a path for me somewhere, like my work matters. And I don't think a lot of leaders were raised in that tradition. They were raised to just manage the people and get the stuff done, be profitable, hit your budgets, et cetera. And now you have this whole workforce of people who expect something different, and a lot of leaders who were kind of left clueless.
You know, Ted, don't tell Catie what I'm going to bring up later to her about my little hidden nugget in the quotients. We're going to keep that later. But for our viewers out there and listeners, something that Catie already has grabbed our attention with. Catie, I know all of these things, but for our viewers and listeners, everybody's heard of IQ, and maybe just some people have heard of EQ. Could you describe, because you're the EQ whisperer here, right? And people might not even understand what that is.
Sure. And it's an important thing to know, especially in the field of leadership, because if you go on the Google and you ask, what are the top leadership skills that I need to have? If it doesn't say emotional intelligence specifically, it'll say things like flexibility, empathy, the ability to have really great relationships. And all of that are components of things that comprise emotional intelligence. So when we think about IQ, that is our sort of our set point for how much we can learn or how intelligent we are, generally speaking. Okay. And this is about things to know, right? And our capacity to learn many more things. Our EQ is very different because it's not a set point. This is a flexible skill that you can develop over time, which is one of the reasons why I love it, especially because it's a key leadership skill. And so when I talk about it, to really simplify what is truly a very complex idea, is it's our ability to take the emotional data that's within inside of us and use that to our best ability. And we use that by marrying it with the emotional data and context of the other people or the other person that's in front of us. So for somebody who is a scientist and a total nerd at heart, I am a database kind of person, even though if you listen to me long enough, you'd say there's no way, but it's true. And so emotional intelligence is being able to use that internal data and the external data look at it kind of almost in 3D and then understand, how do I want to show up, or how do I want to respond? And what's the best thing that would serve the relationship or the interaction that I'm going to have? And so, what I find is that we know that this is a key skill, and many of us don't learn this along the way. The huge gap, and like the reason why I'm so passionate about this, is that nobody teaches you how to be emotionally intelligent. They just say you need to be empathetic. And I literally had one time a coaching client that said, how do I get the empathy? And and it was an honest question, but it's not something that's really taught. And
Did
so
do you go back to Wizard of Oz and open up his chest and say, oh, it was there all the time? The heart was there all the time.
So unfortunately, the blessing and the curse of my profession is that's exactly what I'm doing. And I always say this is some Wizard of Oz stuff that we're doing here. And that also dovetails into the whole naming of my business, and my title as the Minister of Magic is I don't have the answers for everybody. Everybody has the answers within them. What they may not understand is how to interpret the signals that are telling them what they could do, should do, shouldn't do. And I try to help them figure that out, or just to go deeper on themselves. So the magic is being able to uncover what's already there, really in service of the leader that I'm working with. So so thank you for telling everybody this is that's what they're paying for.
It's so interesting to me, because if you ask 100 people this simple question and you say, are you self-aware? 100 people will say yes. And when you look at that bubble of EQ, how can somebody who is leading now or running a business, how can they start to try to become more self-aware? Because there's always that conversation where someone's like, well, you do this all the time. No, that's not me. I'm never like that. I never do those things. But, it really can affect and impact your organization just because you lack self-awareness.
So Ted, your example and the way that you framed that is exactly what I'm looking for when I am finding the right kinds of clients. Because, so I'll give you an example from a coaching session I had yesterday. I had this wonderful leader. He's managing millions of dollars worth of business. He's a high performer in his organization. And he was explaining a frustrating situation at work. And so he's talking about how he's getting annoyed at one of his leaders and is describing the whole thing. And where he ended was, is there a different way to think about this? Because I know I'm frustrated and I think I know what I'm doing. And I technically cannot do the work that he does. Like, he's brilliant, but he's willing to say or suspend belief that he knows that he should be frustrated or that he should follow that emotion. And so when people are defensive in the example that you gave versus being self-aware, which is to say, I think I know, but I might not be right. So let me investigate. And that willingness to investigate, that willingness to suspend belief that I know the answer, is that is the distinction between someone who thinks they're self-aware and actually is.
Well, let me just dive deeper on this, because I think it's very interesting, because when you look at yourself, and a lot of people don't like to do this, because when you have to basically open up the hood and look what's underneath it, a lot of people don't like what they see.
Right.
And isn't the truth that you have to come to the realization that some of who you are may be unchangeable, meaning that, like, you have DNA, you got raised a certain way, and that's sort of your hardware. And then, there's a part of you that is and does have the ability to change. That's your software. Can you speak on that at all, about how you coach people? Or am I saying that right? It's always how I've thought about it.
Oh, Ted, that's it's a really healthy way to think about it too, because so I'll give you a couple of specific examples. I'm coaching someone who has identified that they're somewhere on the autism spectrum. So, and he's very successful. He hasn't told anybody at work. So nobody really knows. And there are ways that he looks at the world. And he said, that's just how I see things. And I'm like, that's great. That's fine. If that's just how you see things, and so my job is to then say, here's where it's going to potentially get in your way. And then here are some other things that you can do to cope with that, to work around it, even if you're predisposed to show up and do something that is counter to what the organization needs. I coached a Fortune 500 CEO years ago who really didn't want to be the CEO. He's not a capital L leader, if you will. He's in a leadership role. What he really wants to do is make really hot deals and make a ton of money for the company and shareholders and everything else, which is like part of the job as a CEO, especially when you're publicly traded. But the other part is to lead the people and set the vision and inspire people to come along, right? So he had to kind of fake it. He had to really figure out ways to do the inspirational stuff, even though that's not who he is fundamentally. And so his success components are really, he does the leadership stuff as much as he can kind of tolerate to do. And where he really leans in hard is trying to make shareholder value. And he knows that there is a gap in how the rest of the organization sees him as a leader, that could potentially dilute trust, that might mean that people aren't really aligned with him and the vision because they don't believe in that. They believe in the financial performance. And so, it's a choice. And he knew it was a choice. And he was willing to take that risk because he thought, hey, the board and what I think my best gifts are just to make more money for the company. And I can't argue with that. It's not important for me to convince someone of that. What's important is to say, make decisions with a lot of clarity and authenticity to say, this is how I want to do this. This is what is right for me. This is what is authentic to me. And then do that and do that really consistently. So I don't fault him for wanting to be that way or for choosing what is really authentic to him, as long as he knew what the risks were by not stretching himself in other capacities. So I think it's okay, but you've got to go in there like seeing the full deck and then knowing how you want to play it.
So Catie, we get the opportunity to meet a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners across the country. And I will tell you already in a short amount of time, you're just continuing to go up the scale in my perspective because of your ability, as you said, scientifically, to really go under the hood, as you mentioned, Ted. So, people that want to get into that coaching career, right? I see a lot of coaches, Catie, out there that claim to be coaches, they claim to be consultants. And when I listen to them, I realize I'm not really buying in, and they're kind of just trying to spew a very vanilla, one-size-fits-all coaching model. And I'm sure you don't do that, of course. And clearly you don't do that. But I see a lot of coaches, and sometimes it can give a bad name to the industry where it's just here, this one size fits all. And I already can tell you're quite the opposite. What advice do you have for people that want to get into the industry and whether they should or should not become a coach?
So I love your question, and I'd love to answer it with a story and then maybe the advice on the tail end of that. So
by the way, that's why I already love you in a short amount of time. You're not just spewing information, you're giving case studies, you're giving examples. You have me so engaged in everything you're saying, and I see that your methodologies, and it's working. It's working wholeheartedly. So please don't change. Continue.
So when in 2013, I was working for an organization called the Partnership for Public Service, which is an amazing nonprofit organization that's based in Washington, D.C. And it works with really senior leaders in the federal government. And so at the time, I was working with a senior leader at the Department of Education who had just taken the role. He was a political appointee in President Obama's first term and really took on a very difficult part of the organization. So 250 people. It was one of the worst places to work in the federal government in terms of their engagement scores and rankings. So he went in there to go and do the job, but also to bring the organization up and to fix the culture. So he and I were working in a consulting sort of relationship with him and his executive team to figure out what we could do to make the culture better. And we had just left like a 2-hour strategy session, and I'm like kind of like a baby consultant. I go back to my cubicle and I'm kind of high-fiving myself like, yes, this was great. And I get a phone call from him. And I thought, oh, geez, I probably left my phone or a notebook or something there. And I said, hey, what's going on? What can I do for you? And he said, I don't think I can do this. We just left an amazing session. Like it was like highlight of the month kind of thing. And he just said, I just came from Capitol Hill. I've only led a team of 15 people and now I have 250 people. And, the Hill's looking at this and the Secretary of Education is, and the president wants that. And the culture is bad. And I don't think I can do this. And I said, okay, hang on. I think you can do this. And I think I can help you. Will you let me help? And he said, yes, but I got to figure this out because I'm literally standing at the edge of the cliff and I don't think I can do this. So I run into my boss's office and say, I think I can help this guy, but I don't want to wing it. I feel like he needs coaching because it's a confidence thing. He's got more capability than most people who get into that position. And so fortunately, that organization believed in me. They sent me to Georgetown University to their leadership coaching program. And That's where I learned the foundational techniques, the frameworks, and the models that you use to not just have interesting conversations to just build self-awareness with people, but the goal is to propel them to action. So a lot of people who build themselves as coaches don't go through a certification process. They don't have that point of view of your client is here and we need to get them to there. So, and how do we do that? Through questions, through inquiry, through self-discovery, through practice and behavior change. So at Georgetown, and there are many programs like that out there now that can certify coaches, they really teach you that that structure and that model. It's not a one size fits all. If you sat through all of my coaching sessions in a day, there's not any that are alike. But it does bring people to a point where they're compelled to change. They're compelled to go make amends for something. They're compelled to do more introspection to get better business results. And so I'm not giving advice. I'm not I mean, most of my clients do things that I've never done before and could never do. Engineers, construction people, finance, like you name it. They're not industries that I would have ever gone into because I don't have that kind of capability and probably capacity to perform like they do. But what I can do is help them see different ways to be more effective leaders and to get the business results they want and really see how their individual day-to-day way that they're leading themselves and their teams impact the bottom line at the end of the year. Without being able to go through a program that certifies me as a coach like Georgetown, I would not have been able to do that. I would have been winging it and shooting from the hip based on experience and things that I've seen, which is a very consultative practice. And that's an important it's an important skill and gift to have, but coaching goes a little bit deeper than that. In fact, a lot bit deeper if you're doing it the right way. And so I am a purist in that way, that I think that people do need training and certification to understand the human dimension that they're really working with. And I am wary about people who say, oh yeah, I'm just a coach for this and a coach for that. They're maybe a lowercase c coach, but I consider myself and my colleagues who have put themselves and continue to put themselves through these paces to learn more in the practice of coaching as a capital C coach.
Catie, I think one of the questions I have maybe for our audience today is that I used to love LinkedIn, I have to tell you, and I'm beginning to despise LinkedIn to a degree. And the degree that's happening is that every single day I get a 10x coach that sends me a LinkedIn connection. I've never met so many 10x coaches that probably can't 10x their own business, but they're going to teach me how to 10x my business. And I'm wondering, based upon your comments, like, how do you sniff out the crap in there? You know, the people that are really can't do that, don't know how to do it. Because I'm sure there are some people that can, but not everybody is like your Grant Cardone type personality, right? So it's like,
right.
How do you sniff that person out if you do think you need a coach to try to accelerate top line revenue?
So most coaches that I know that are really exceptional at accelerating top line revenue don't talk about that.
Right.
They never present themselves that way. And quite frankly, that seems like table stakes at this stage of the game. If you're going to hire me and spend thousands of dollars working with me or your team over a period of time, or even just a one in time, 10x, is that it? Really?
Yeah.
Because like everybody's time is more valuable than it used to be. So 10x doesn't seem like enough to me. And really, that's not always what people are looking for. So I get those too, which cracks me up. I'm like, did you not read my profile? This is what I do.
I was like, is it bad of me, Catie, that I send back a note and go, as soon as you show me a P&L that you 10x'd your own business, I'm happy to talk to you.
Well, first of all, Ted,
right.
it's bad of you that you even sent a note back. So let's just start there. Okay, so that's a whole nother topic.
That's true.
So you're saying I got a chance. That's basically what they heard when they saw it.
It's even if they knew that the auto email or the auto LinkedIn thing even came out, they're just like, oh, good, Ted responded. Let me go back to that. But Catie, to Ted's point, what quick advice for all of our viewers do you provide when they see those things, and who to, I mean, other than picking you, obviously, right? Because I pick you. And you know, there's any and all listeners, viewers, associates, friends of ours. I live in a world of FOMO. I constantly hear that from friends of like, Lee, what are you doing next? What am I missing out on? Because, you know, people just like myself, I follow a lot of people, and what am I missing out on? So I'm already following you. We're already going to be staying in touch. In a short 25 minutes, I'm already a gigantic fan. But for for people out there, if they're not able to use you, obviously they're going to reach out to you, and we'll tell them at the end of this how to do that. What do they do in their local community to find somebody?
So the best way to find a coach is to find somebody who is really successful, whether it's in your industry or an adjacent one, or just somebody you know, and ask them who they're working with, because usually the best people in business, the ones that are not just seemingly having top line revenue, but really have a profitable business that's growing, that's scaling, that's delivering for their customers. We know who those people are, right? You can tell when it's somebody says, oh yeah, my business made $5 million last year. And you know that they actually spent 7 or 8. So that's not who we want to talk to, right? But it's really talking to the people that you know are students of the game of getting better at what they're leading their business or leadership in general. Almost all those people have worked with a coach at some point. And so a lot of the referrals that I get, or a lot of the business that I get, is coming from direct referrals of I've worked with Catie, you should work with Catie. And so a lot of my coach friends, we do the same thing too. Like somebody will come to me and say, hey, who do you know? I need to find a coach for this particular leader. And we, kind of farm out business cards that way. So it's really about a word of mouth thing. If you see somebody who is highly exceptional at what they're doing, chances are that they've worked with a business coach, a leadership coach of some sort. And that's where I would start. And the people who do this work, the capital C coaches, I will get people that I'll say, we're not the best people to work together, but I can find you a coach who is, and I can guarantee you that you're going to align really well with them too. And so, yeah, I would just say, just start hitting the pavement as opposed to taking these people who are just advertising to you. And I get it. They're probably well-intentioned. They're trying to make money and be in business too, but it's really a relationship game, the same way it would be if you wanted to date somebody and you'd say, hey, do you know Ted? Do you know Lee? And they go, yeah, they're good guys. Okay, I'll go out with them. It's the same kind of thing. And it's
we're way too old for that. Once you break 50 and you have all the kids, we aren't thinking in the dating world, but I agree from a business perspective, you're right. Let me speak to 2 questions, and I'm going to throw this as we wrap up in the next 10 minutes. I've said for 25 years in business now that I've owned businesses, I couldn't believe how successful people are in spite of themselves. Now, I've always said that statement for years. I probably say it to friends directly. I can't believe how successful you are in spite of yourself. Those people could be substantially more successful. Do you run into those scenarios, and how do you speak to those individuals that think, I'm so good, but they're almost blocking their own potential?
So I do, but those end up not being the people that I work with, because I can see it, because I'm with you. I think once you're in the game long enough, you can see that. And I actually think that that's okay. I look in organizations too, and I see that you have to have B players in your organization. They keep your lights on, they keep your customers happy, they keep things moving, they build processes, they don't rock the boat. We need people who can take a process or a change and go, yep, okay, we'll implement that, and they'll just go through and do that. There are business owners who are the exact same way, and that's okay. You need to be able to go to a Toyota dealership and buy a new 4Runner if that's what you want. But that doesn't have to mean that that guy or that gal who owns that dealership is running the auto group that covers Southeast Texas. Like, who cares? They just want to run a dealership. Cool. Do that. Do it really well, exceptionally well. And I think that right now, there is this bias for, you got to grow, you got to scale, you got to sell, you don't got to do any of those things, really. That's a section of the business world. And there's a section of the business world where if you need a new car 5 years from now and you want to go buy yourself a new Tundra, you go to Jim's Toyota up the street, and that's all he's focused on. And that's great. You're going to get great service from Jim.
See, that's what's nice, Catie. You're out of Texas, correct?
Yeah, San Antonio.
So of course, you reference the Tundra, any big truck out there. It makes complete sense why you did it. I'm
a Ford girl myself, so let me just put that out there. Give me a new Bronco any day.
So I'm going to throw this out. We talked about IQ, and Ted and I have talked about this for years. And I will say we don't have a patent on it, but we talk about IQ, and you being the scientist and obviously understand this. We talk about EQ, but we always say, and we've said this for years, one of the most important qualities of a successful entrepreneur is their AQ. Are you familiar with AQ?
No.
Do you want to take a guess?
Adaptability.
Oh, nice. I like it. Well done. Another guess? I'm putting you on the spot.
No, you're putting me on the
That's all right.
spot and I'm losing. I'm like, I can think of all other words that don't start with the letter A.
So
Okay.
here's all I'm going to ask, Katie, because I'm going to send you an email after this. And after you steal what I'm saying and you start using it with your clients, I'm going to expect an email each time like, hey, Lee, I use this.
You got it.
For entrepreneurship, other than having a form of IQ, a nice level, a form of EQ, because it's a recipe, that final accoutrement in the meal is your adversity quotient. And we always talk about the adversity quotient. And I see, Katie, you might be writing that down or wanting to. But it's, there you go. How much can you tolerate before you give up? And that we've always found from an entrepreneurship perspective is the true path of success. Because again, you can get as far as you can get on your own. You need coaches like yourself, Katie, to get to the next level. But to just have some level of success, that adversity quotient is one of the most important pieces. Independent of IQ and EQ, we've always found AQ to be important. So I wanted to impart that on you as a little nugget at the end of our show.
I love that. I'm an early stage startup advisor in a couple different capacities for a couple different organizations. And I had a founder this week who asked me to mentor them formally. And one of the things that he told me was, yeah, I went through this whole accelerator. I got investment. I did all this great stuff. I have an MVP. And then I threw it out the window because I learned something new. And I don't know if this is going to work, but here's what I've come up with. And his next plan is brilliant. It's like, it 10X's his original one, right? But it's exceptional. And I said, why did you decide to do that? It's wild after you got investment. He said, I could not sleep at night knowing that my investors were going to be investing in something that I know was not even a 1.0 model. It's a 0.5 model. This is the 2.0 model. And this is great. And I know it's a huge risk because everybody bought into the original idea, but I think this next one is good. So I love that. And I'm totally stealing that. And I promise I will give you credit every single time I use it.
Well, there is a rule of three. The first time you give credit, the first time you say my name, the second time you say a friend, and the third time it's yours. But just make sure you email me.
You got it.
Well, I'm convinced that, any entrepreneur on an island is going to have a very tough time succeeding. And all entrepreneurs either need an advisory board, a board of directors, or a coach to really help them, bounce off ideas or figure out how to grow their leadership skills or grow their organization. Those that have them, I think, do better and grow faster. So for people that are watching the podcast today, they heard your expertise in this area of EQ, which I still believe is the most important trait of any leader out there. You could have gone to the worst college in the world. If you have the AQ, like Lee mentioned, and you have the EQ that you talked about today, you got a pretty good chance of succeeding. So for folks that are watching, how can they get in touch with you, learn more about how you coach people and the way you coach people to help them develop personally and increase their business professionally?
Oh, wonderful. So you can find me on my website at colibrimagic.com. So COLIBRI, which means hummingbird in Spanish. And I'm on LinkedIn. So I accept all requests when people come in with that. I'm on TikTok and I do videos about EQ and other leadership things. So I'm the Catie Campbell. I'm also on Instagram as the Catie Campbell. And, you can come on my website and book an introductory call with me just to say, what is coaching like? Because a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to work with a coach, or they have, but I'm a little bit different. And so they can come on, cost them nothing but 30 minutes of their time to just explore what would they want to get from coaching and whether or not I'm the right person to work with. And if not, I'll find them the right person.
Well, this has been awesome today. Thank you for sharing your expertise with our audience. Always looking to make them more book smart, more street smart. This side of the EQ of street smarts, is I think it's paramount if you want to succeed in today's business world. So everyone on here, remember the website is colibrimagic.com. This is, I pronounce you, the Minister of Magically. We will not have that again on the podcast. And Catie, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day and talking to our audience here on the Shrimp Tank.
Ted, Lee, thank you so much. And thank you to all your listeners. I really appreciate the opportunity to hang out with y'all this morning.
Guys, I'm going to throw one thing before we wrap it up real quick. I want to say for our viewers and listeners out there, the one thing I took away many things to Katie. The one thing is sometimes you just got to go back and high five yourself. Just like she did in that early case. You said you left the meeting, you thought it was amazing. You went back and you high-fived yourself. And I do recommend doing that, of course, as any entrepreneur struggling through everything that we do every day. Catie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're very welcome.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.